All right, folks, welcome to another edition of XenTegra's Webinar Wednesdays. Hope everybody's having a great week. And for those who are returning, welcome back. This week, we have a great guest. We have Login VSI, and we are going to be talking about performance and if it's got you down. And we're going to talk about how Login VSI can help with that. My name is Pete Downing. I'm your host and CMTO of XenTegra. On the phone, I have Mark Powell from Login VSI, but before I pass the mic to let him introduce himself, just shout out to Brian. Brian unfortunately had a conflict today, last minute, that was unavoidable, and Mark stepped up and is going to be our presenter today. So we are still in good hands, and I'm excited to talk about Login VSI again. Second time for Login VSI to be on Webinar Wednesdays this year. So Mark, yeah, give yourself a quick intro, and let's highlight what you're going to talk about today, and I'll pass the baton to you in a couple minutes.
Sure. Thank you, Pete. So happy to be here. Thank you for having me. My name is Mark Powell, one of the engineers on staff for Login VSI. I've been here about a year and a half. It's been about 15 years in the EUC world. So the Citrix, the VMware spaces, been a lot of time over there. So happy to be here.
Sweet. So welcome, Mark, and thanks for taking time out of your day. All right, we are on GoToWebinar, so for those who have joined us in the past, you know the drill. Ask questions via the question and answer dialog box. The great thing about that is they are recorded, so we always have a record of all the questions. If for some reason we can't get to your question or we didn't answer it, you can always follow up. And yeah, we encourage questions, so definitely let us know if you have any questions, and if some reason our audio is off or whatever, just let me know. We pay attention to the Q&A as well. All right, so simple agenda, nothing crazy here. We always start off with some quick polls, which you all know I like to do. I'm going to start off with some poll questions, and then I will pass the mic over to Mark and let him talk through what is Login VSI, and then we'll close out the session for today. So looking forward to that. But before we do, definitely head over to XenTegra.com/webinars. We have a lot of great webinars coming up over the next couple months. I've just finalized the September schedule. So we got a lot of great vendors in September, and we are bleeding into October already, if you can believe that. I can't believe I'm already talking about the fall. So definitely sign up. And if you don't know, we are doing what's called the Team Lunch Giveaway in Q3. So if you sign up for a webinar, you get credits towards Grubhub, and you can get up to $50 in credits per month towards Grubhub. And if you attend all 4 webinars in a month, you get an extra credit. And then if you attend all the webinars in the quarter, you get even more credits. So you can earn up to $250 in Grubhub credits throughout the quarter, and also potentially win lunch for your team. So we will be doing the giveaway in October, and we'll announce the winner in October. Parallel to that, we have a lot of great events. 2 shout outs for 2 events that are coming up tomorrow. I am doing my monthly WVD Nuts to Bolts workshop, where I go through and highlight what is WVD, some of the new things that Microsoft's doing around WVD, and how does it fit into your strategy. And we'll talk about that. So that's an all-day workshop, 10 to 4. If you feel like learning about Microsoft WVD, definitely sign up today. Plenty of slots. Later in the afternoon tomorrow, we got Liquidware. We are going to be talking about app layering. So Randy Price, one of our great SEs, is going to be highlighting Liquidware. It's a fun workshop. You learn about app layering, how does it fit in with Azure, your EUC environment, and why Liquidware is a great solution for app layering. Podcasts, we got a lot of great podcasts. Andy, our founder and CEO, loves to do them, and I publish them and produce them. We got 2 coming out this week, so keep an eye out for those. But head over, and if you like to listen to podcasts, we do podcasts on what's called the Citrix Session, and we're about to launch a new podcast, so keep an eye out for that. And we're going to continue to grow our podcast library. All right, so for those who have joined in the past, they know I love polls. For those who are new, get ready. You're going to answer some fun questions. So the first poll I got is a poll, very simple one, around application outages. So I'm going to launch this poll, and as I launch it, all the answers are anonymous, so don't worry. Others can't see your answer, they can't see your name, etc. But yeah, answer as best as possible. When was the last application outage you had? And try to be honest here. And if you're not in the space, or you don't really care, you don't have to answer. And I like to get at least 50% or higher of attendees to participate. So we got about 79 folks on today. So definitely, if we can get, I like to get 50%, and it makes Mark and I be able to have some good data to reference as we go through the day today. So doing a last call for clicks. So going once, going twice, and going 3 times. And we're going to close this. So a lot of folks said they had an application outage 1+ month ago. So that's interesting. And the honest folks said 2+ weeks last week and this week. So, and anybody who voted never, yeah, I doubt that. I guarantee you had an outage. Either that, or you just answered never because you're not, working in the space and you're trying to fool us. But anyway, if you say never, I find that hard to believe, because applications are always going to go down. There's always going to be an outage, and it's how you address it and solve it. All right, let's talk about application compatibility. Does your enterprise test application compatibility when updating applications in the EUC environment? So when you do an install, or you add a new app, or you make a tweak to your image, do you test it? And really the goal here is to highlight a great feature around change control with Login VSI, and the ability to see what an application does when you update it. If you add a new app, what does it do to the workload? How does it impact performance, etc. So that's really the goal of this question. And we have one person or 2 people that say, hey, they leverage Login VSI. So if you're a Login VSI customer, awesome, thank you. And we're going to give this final couple more seconds. Last call for clicks. Going once, going twice, and going gone. So now we got about 53% say, hey, we leverage another tool. So that's interesting. We have another chunky that say, so it's almost 50-50. That live on the edge is what I said. So definitely pay attention today. We're going to talk about app compatibility and how Login VSI can help with that. All right, final couple questions here. Does your enterprise how does your enterprise solve performance problems today? So what do you do to solve performance issues? Do you scale up? Do you scale out? Do you monitor? Do you just reboot because hey, it works? Or you need help figuring that out? And be honest here. The data helps us drive the conversation. So we'll give a couple more seconds here. And it's funny, like database is the big culprit, and scaling up and scaling out seem to be the big solver there. Compute, do you throw more virtual machines at it? So scale out. If you're in an Azure environment, let's say. So there's a lot of ways to address performance, and Login VSI can help you identify where those bottlenecks are. All right, we're gonna do last call for clicks. Going once, going twice, and done. So there's a lot of folks out there that use a monitoring tool. And then I would say the top end of the tier here, if we were to add the first 2 together, kind of equal to the monitoring bucket, right? And you scale up, you scale out, that's great. However, that's probably not the best way to deal with it. It'd be nice to know why, right? And so that's where Login VSI can definitely help. It also can show you if the application is causing the problem. So that's really cool about Login VSI. So we'll talk a little bit about that today. All right, final 2 questions, more informational. Are you using Microsoft Office 365 today? And if you are, what kind of model are you in? Are you in kind of an on-prem / hybrid model? You're full on Exchange Online. You're in the midst of deploying. It's not on the radar. You got reasons why you can't do Office 365. Maybe it's cost. Maybe it's HIPAA. Different reasons, and then finally, hey, you're a Google Chrome shop, which I don't judge on that. All right, so last call for clicks. Going once, going twice, and going 3 times. And that's a fun question, because our last webinar we did with Login VSI, we actually talked about Office and how it performed in various cloud scenarios. So if you were part of that webinar, you got a download of the PDF with the key. We weren't allowed to say the vendors, and hopefully you enjoyed that. If you're interested in getting access to that white paper, definitely reach out. We can send it to you. All right, so let's talk the final question, more of a just interesting tidbit question for us, because Login VSI can play into this question. My enterprise is evaluating or using Azure infrastructure as a service, so the compute side of Azure today. So are you looking at infrastructure service? So it can be WVD, it can be you use Azure to run workloads, etc. But don't include like SQL into this. Don't include AI. That's a whole different bucket. This is more classical. Hey, I'm looking to put compute in Azure. So we'll give you guys a couple seconds to answer this. And I'm going to do last call for clicks, going once, going twice, and going 3 times. And we got a lot of folks in the yes bucket, which is great. And we got a good chunk of folks in the no bucket. So it'd be interesting to dig in with that. But one of the things I'll say is Microsoft just started their fiscal year. And they got a lot of incentive programs to get you to try before you buy. So if you're interested in getting free money and trying out Azure, now little caveat there, you actually have to be a IT shop in an enterprise. And if you're interested in getting some dollars towards your piloting, let us know. They got a lot of great programs to enable you to try it before you buy it. All right, so that's our polls for today. Thanks for playing. As always, the data helps us drive the conversation. If you're not following XenTegra in Login VSI on social media, please do. We both try to put up good, solid content and pick your poison. For example, LinkedIn is a great medium for a lot of us, just because we post a lot of business pertinent information there. Some people like Twitter. YouTube, I put these webinars, they eventually make their way up to YouTube. So if you ever want to go and look at some of the older webinars, you can. Login VSI, this is actually their 3rd time doing Webinar Wednesdays with me. So frequent guest, and they provide a lot of great content. All right, so we're gonna dig in and talk about poor performance got you down. Login VSI can help. Mark, our presenter, is gonna take over. I'm gonna pass the baton over to you, Mark, and let you do your thing. So here you go.
All right.
Coming your way. So here you go, make presenter, and I'm gonna let you take control.
Let's see. Let me know when you can see it.
Yep, I can see it. Perfect.
All right, great. So we're going to talk about performance today. We're going to talk about application compatibility and a few other things. So as I said before, I'm Mark Powell, Login VSI. So we do a couple things. We started out as a consulting company from a bunch of VMware and Citrix guys. Basically, we got tired of trying to guess, how much infrastructure or capacity we were going to need to accommodate a certain amount of users in a build or a consulting engagement or a deployment. So we built our premier tool, which is Login VSI, that would conduct synthetic transactions in any application or workload the way a user would do it. And we would load that up to scale to tell us what the breaking point of the environment was, and how much hardware we had to procure to fit the solution. Over the past few years, we've evolved into, maximizing the end user experience, being leveraged as a change management tool, understanding application compatibility from an automation standpoint, and then still the density and load testing piece as well, to tell us, how various workloads are going to perform at scale. So we're all about maximizing the end user experience. There was a Gartner study that came out for this year that's in the top 10 list of C-level objectives. So it's very important with everybody working from home, or a lot of people, I should say, nowadays. We've had to go through these kind of motions of understanding, how do we improve end user experience when working remote? What's the effect of adding all these additional users onto our platform? How do we accommodate all these additional users? So we really have been instrumental in that scenario in helping customers and helping clients and vendors understand how to do that. So there's a couple problems that we solve, right? So these VDI environments, they typically have a lifespan of 3 to 5 years, right? And there's a lot of components that go into the stack, right? There's storage, network, compute, but then there's the Windows layer, the application layer, Windows profiles, antivirus, all these things that you put into the solution. And then, oh, by the way, you have to change these things all the time, right? You have to do patches, you have to, put out AV definitions and all these things. And these VDI environments are really sensitive to change, right? When you move to different versions of Windows 10, right? There's a new version every 6 months. How do you manage that in the environment? Do you just throw it out there? Do you validate it ahead of time? How do you validate it? How do you know it's going to give you better or more performance than the previous version? So we're really looking at poor end user experience. So I'll go into this a little bit more, but we have a concept called launchers where we basically simulate an end user's endpoint. So we can look at the bandwidth saturation, the round trip time, the protocol latency from their endpoint and understand, what may be causing slowness from their network standpoint. And then at the application layer, we're actually doing custom interactions in applications. So that could be, I'll use the example of an EMR application. We may, through a synthetic, start the application or log into Citrix, for example, start the application, log in, pull a patient record, manipulate the record, email it to a clinician, and then log out, right? We can measure every single one of those metrics, right, and put timers around them to understand how long that should take. We can then run that at scale with a bunch of users doing that, or we can run it continuously to understand, hey, if there's a blip or the login times exceed a certain amount of time or pulling the patient record, we want to be alerted on that, right? And then what we're trying to do in that process is create, you may have this classic example, because I was a Citrix admin and an engineer for a number of years. You may have help desk users or users calling into the help desk saying, Citrix is slow. Well, what we're trying to do is, slow is very hard to quantify, and so what we're trying to do is create normal. We're trying to create, what's a normal logon time, right? What is the normal application response times? What's normal latency from this branch office or that branch office, or from headquarters or from Azure, right? What's that look like? So that when we have degradations in those values, we can then understand what exactly is causing it. And we're going to be alerted ahead of time, so we're not waiting until the help desk is overloaded to figure out that there's an issue in the environment. And then the other thing is, from the scalability and density testing, we're able to understand, how many users you can fit in the environment, or how many instances of public cloud, whatever instance number it is, you need to accommodate your users. We've had a number of customers that will have a vendor, spec out a particular architecture or build for a certain number of users based on, say, reference architecture, that ends up not getting them to that point. We've had several customers that got a lot less, and the classic, answer to fixing that problem is just throw more hardware at it. Well, that may not always be the case, or the solution, I should say. We've had some customers that they ended up running, tests with our software, and they had different versions of antivirus running scans at the same time on the same storage volumes, and they had asynchronous writes incorrectly configured on their storage array. And so by just making some adjustments there, they're able to get a lot more density on the system without spending any additional money on hardware. So we have, running this in production continuously, right? Understanding changes in performance. But then there's the platform availability component as well. So yeah, we want to understand performance on the end user experience, but we also want to understand application and platform availability. So if I'm a hospital and I run, say, Epic Hyperspace, it's pretty important for me that I can log into Epic and pull an X-ray down and then send it off, or send a pharmacy order in. If I can't do that, that's critical to healthcare. So we want to understand, are the systems available? Are they working? We have a number of customers, say, I'll use a call center, for example, where that's their business, they're taking calls. And so we've actually been able to, they've come in before and for shift, and systems aren't working, the application's down. So what we do with this particular customer I'm thinking about is an hour before shift starts, we're actually running synthetic workloads from the call center location that will log into the call system, simulate, it'll get in the call queue, simulate taking a call, log the call in the ticketing platform, and then log out. And knowing that works ahead of time provides them tremendous value. And then there's the pre-production part, right? Doing the density scalability, understanding, how we're going to map out and architect how many, how many CPUs and RAM and disk IO I need for my systems, how many users I'm going to get on each VM if you're running terminal server setup or something like that. So it's pretty useful. So on the continuous testing side, we're able to give you real-time performance measurements. We're able to give you historical measurements as well. We can do automatic SLA reporting. So like I said, every action in these application workloads can be measured. And it's pretty neat with the SLA reporting. Say you have a Citrix environment and you're serving up an app, and it's not your app, it's a client server application. Somebody else owns it internally. You don't have insight into the back-end infrastructure. You can send the application owner or team daily, weekly, monthly an SLA report with thresholds and metrics around each interaction of their application, and they can see their performance of their application in the environment. So it's pretty useful tool. It's kind of like an accountability tool as well. So I mean, if they're getting that daily, for example, and they make a change to their app on Saturday night on the back end, and then they see a performance degradation on the report on Monday, they know, okay, we put this change in the code. It's causing issues. We need to revert or fix it or whatever. So then we have our application compatibility testing, and I don't know how you guys are testing apps today, but it's common, if you have hundreds or thousands of apps, say you do patches on the weekend or something, you then have a team of people that come in typically and test these apps. Or if you're doing DevOps, you have a team that's doing smoke testing of the apps. Do they launch? Do they function? Can you do basic stuff inside of them? So what we're doing with this module is essentially automating that process. So what we do is you have an application that launches, and it's in a known good state. We take a snapshot of that, we store it into a database. We then at specified intervals open those applications up automatically with a synthetic. And then if the new image picture of the application deviates from a certain percentage of the original, we're either going to pass or fail it. So then you're going to get a report, on a recurring basis about how these apps are functioning. We're also going to measure the performance of those apps, how long it took for them to load. So we can see over time if we're making changes to these apps as well, how much longer it's taking them to load or less. So it's pretty useful tool for kind of replacing human UAT, if you will. And then there's the capacity and application load testing. So we can tell you as you add more users in the environment what the breaking point is based on the application workloads you're running, right? So if it's office-based applications for a productivity worker, or maybe you're doing like CAD and you want to understand you have heavy GPU users, you want to understand how much more density can I get with GPUs versus non-GPUs. Say you're looking at different instances of Azure, and you can do a comparative analysis on load tests. So you can say, okay, a D4 has is 3 seconds per interaction faster than a D3S or something like that. And you can see that data side by side and make the best estimated decision about how you want to make changes in the environment, roll out the environment. Vice versa, you can do, it's infinite, the possibilities, but say you had a whole Citrix environment that was running server 2016 on the back end, and you want to go to 2019, you want to understand how much more capacity you're going to need, because typically you go up in versions of Windows, you're going to lose capacity. It's just kind of the pig of what Windows is. So it's kind of very useful tool for doing comparative analysis and planning infrastructure. So why do users have poor user experience? Like I said before, it's hard to quantify slow. We're doing a lot of things in these environments. We're running a lot of different software. We're making a lot of changes. So, we're trying to get to the bottom of this before it becomes problematic. And then there's going to the public cloud, right? That's a big topic a lot of people want to do nowadays, especially with Windows Virtual Desktop coming out, and a lot of traditional vendors like Citrix and VMware moving to cloud models. There's a real impact of choosing the wrong VM size, right? Because everything in public cloud is a t-shirt size. You get hard coded into a SKU and you're kind of stuck with that. To migrate, a little bit more than a little effort. So we can help you make that decision, right? Which instances are going to give you the most density, so that you don't overspend for too many resources or underspend and have a poor user experience, poor performance. So that's where our density and scalability testing comes in. We can help you do that comparative analysis. And a lot of these reference architectures you'll see, written by Citrix, written by VMware, there's the Citrix VDI handbook that says you need to allocate, for a heavy user, 2 gigs of RAM and an X amount of CPU. And there's the 5 and 10 rule with sizing, on NUMA configurations. Those, a lot of the vendors, most of them use our software to, introduce new code into their platforms, and also, do scalability testing of their own to understand the performance. But they're typically doing that on, vanilla Windows builds with minimal security software. They might have done some operating system optimizations, but they're very vanilla. So every customer, every environment is going to have their own proprietary configurations, their own applications, their own things that they've done to those images. So we always recommend you test on your own stuff, because that's going to give you the real tangible data that applies to you. Not that there's anything wrong with following reference architectures, they're just not always correct. Best practices are not always best for you, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And then I talked about, end user experience from different locations. So we want to understand as well, if a user, how their experience is, say they're in Germany versus a user in Virginia, we can see that data. We can understand, how long it's taken them to log in, what their round trip time is, what their protocol latency is into Citrix ICA, or maybe it's PC over IP or Blast or RDS, whatever it is. We can report on those metrics and we can create alerts around those as well. I think I talked about this. So yeah, we're continuously collecting data. We have a very simple dashboard. We can tell you the longer you run these tests, we can actually create a predictive analysis of what that performance is going to look like in the future based on historical analysis. And then we're able to, at a very quick level, dive into the metrics, application failures. If an application can't do something, or it runs to an error or something like that, we'll actually take a screenshot. We'll take a log file of it as well, but we'll take a screenshot of what the application was doing when it failed. And then we have a public API built in as well. So if say you have, whatever your IT service management platform is, ServiceNow or whatever it is, you can, through API calls, just immediately dump that data into the ticketing system, create a ticket, and that way, it gets assigned to somebody and everybody's aware of it. So looking at root cause analysis, so we can tell you, several things: the application interactions, the latency. We're also going to break down the logon stack. So we're going to tell you the total logon time for a user, time to get a profile, time for Microsoft group policies, protocol latency. We're going to tell you how long those things are happening, how long it takes for those things to happen every time a user logs into the platform and runs a workload. That can be overlaid with machine level data to actually discover root cause analysis, right? We have customers that integrate our platforms with other monitoring platforms, like system monitoring platforms. So we have customers running us on the control up dashboard. We have customers running us on Lakeside. Liquidware has a great tool, Stratosphere, that's on my screen here, that actually overlays user level metrics and experience level metrics with our synthetic users. So it's really cool. We've done a lot of tests with that where we've been able to get some really good results. Questions?
So Mark, what would you say your number one kind of driver to using Login VSI is today, like outside of traditional EUC? So what's a good other use case outside of end user compute that you guys find yourself falling into as far as Login VSI goes?
I mean, we work on physical machines too. So
Okay.
you can run Login Enterprise on a physical desktop. And we have customers that do that actually are evaluating different like physical hardware platforms, or they want to monitor endpoints from like a call center perspective or something like that, actually simulate, if they're not using VDI or server-based computing, they can still get benefits out of it. But yeah, a lot of it is EUC. I mean, we're directly focused on that. So we have a couple of use cases, but it's I think I talked on most of them, but it's pretty much the scalability and density testing, the continuous testing, application compatibility, platform availability, and then the change management piece, which I didn't really talk about much.
Yep.
But I can talk about it. So once you baseline your performance, it should take, say I use my Excel workload, which I'll show you in a second here, but it's going to start Excel, it's going to open a new sheet, it's going to populate rows and columns, and then sum up the values, create a table, and then save the file and close. Once I understand that it's okay, it should take 3 seconds to start Excel, it should take another 2 seconds to open a new sheet, it takes 10 seconds to populate a row. Once I know all those data value points and I know, okay, my average log on time is 25 seconds or whatever it is, I can set up a new system with all my changes already on it. So I can update Office, I can update Windows, I can run those same workloads, that same Excel workload through the new platform, and I can look at the performance degradation, or I can look and see, oh, it actually broke this function in Excel. I don't want to roll this out. So I can kind of do like some forecasting, some magic 8-ball forecasting, right, about what's going to happen before I make the actual change.
Cool. All right. Yeah. So if there's any questions from the audience, please definitely feel free to ask. And Mark, I think you got a little something to show us today. I know again, this was a last minute shift change. Brian unfortunately had a thing, so Mark stepped up and gracefully jumped on today to take us through Login VSI. But as always, he always comes prepared. So yeah, so if you have anything you want to highlight, Mark.
Yeah, I can show you guys the software. I can show you our dashboard. I can show you the synthetic user if you've never seen it. Let me just bring it up on my screen now. 1 second. Okay, can you guys see?
Yep.
So I should ask you, Pete. Yeah, so this is that same Excel workload running. So this is just running like a Citrix server-based desktop. It'll log in. It'll launch like Notepad and like type some text. It'll paint a circle in MS Paint. It'll actually create a Excel sheet like I mentioned before, and then it'll report on all the metrics. So this is our dashboard, and that can be customized to any app. We have a application toolkit where you can create your own custom workloads. So, but yeah, this is our dashboard. So if you envision like this is your environment, an environment to us could be anything. It could be, a Citrix or a Horizon, or these could be different locations. So this could go in like an operations center, and you'd understand at a high level, right? How that particular location is functioning, right? I can see application errors in the last hour, right? I can see the log files. I can see the screenshots of what's happening inside those apps when it's failing. I can see latency at a snapshot perspective. This latency this launcher is just running in the data center, so it's really low latency. But I can see login failures as well, performance in the environment, so I can see from a login perspective, how long it's taking average to log in. You can see it's just under 20 seconds. You see this red line here, that's the threshold, right? If it exceeded 40, then I'm going to get an alert on that. Going back into the continuous testing results, so these workloads are running all the time. So every time it logs in, For each one of these data points, like I said, we wrap timers around them for every interaction. We're going to actually show you how long it's taking to perform that action. And we can go back historically and look how this has been performing in the environment. We can do a predictive analysis and tell you, what we think that performance is going to be in the future based on what it's been in the past and currently. And then we can also go back to the logon stack, right? And we can see the logins over a period of time. This is the predictive analysis, but I can go back over the past hour, day, week, whatever it is. And I can switch environments pretty easily, right? So say, I have a different location, or maybe I have a different environment running different application workloads, or whatever it is, I can switch that over and show that data. And then the events, I can just see, what's been happening over the last, hour or so, if there's any, application execution or login failures or anything to that degree. And I can actually see what's going on inside of that failure. This is the SLA report that I kind of mentioned. So this one has a couple thresholds like app start times. Some of the Excel interactions are on here. Latency threshold, 150 milliseconds. So it gets sent to this person here daily, and I can actually see these SLA reports. Drag it over here, and so I can see, how performance in that particular application in the last day has been performing. So this is what I was talking about. If you had an application owner or a team, this is what they would get, sent to their mailbox every day if you wanted them to. So that's pretty much continuous testing in a box there. I didn't show the latency, but I showed it on the main page. The application compatibility testing report. So this is just saying, we're going to give it a schedule of what applications we want it to run, and then we're actually going to mark metrics on, which apps failed, which ones, didn't meet the performance threshold that we have specified, what the average time is for each app that's opening. We're going to tell you like the configuration of the environment, right? We're running RDS, display resolution, what machine we ran it from, what machine we landed on in the target environment. And we're going to tell you, what the application looked like I said before, when it actually launches, if there's any errors on it, reasons why we failed it, that kind of thing. So it's pretty straightforward. And then on the load testing side, I thought I clicked it. Oh, here we are. On the load testing side, we can see we can do an overlay of a comparative analysis. We can open an individual test. We have a scenario for what actually ran in the load test. So this one ran 15 users within 15 minutes, and the test ran for 30 minutes after the last user logged on. It actually ran Excel, PowerPoint, Excel interaction, PowerPoint advanced. So we can select this particular load test. We'd actually view what occurred in the test. So I can highlight the Excel portion, for example, and I can see, this is users logging on. This is the point where they all are on. And so this is probably the heaviest part of the workload. It's halfway through when it's calculating values, and you can see how the interaction times actually increase, right? So maybe we do another test, and I mean, this is pretty steep rise, but arising from 4 minutes average interaction time. But we could do another test and find the breaking point, right? At what point does the application take forever to respond or have issues not completing? That would be like the point where we didn't want to reach. But like I said, you can do comparative analysis on these tests as well and overlay the interactions. And this can all be exported to a report and things like that too. We have a public API, like I said. This is where you would configure your alerting. So you use an SMTP relay, and that's where if you exceeded your threshold, you're going to get alerts on these. It's pretty straightforward. I don't know if you guys want to see how it's what it takes to set it up, but it's pretty simple. I'll go through it real quick. So on the continuous testing side, these are all pretty similar, but on the continuous testing side, we're pretty agnostic. So we support, NetScaler, Storefront, Microsoft RDS, Horizon. We actually have custom connectors too. So we have customers using Okta as an authentication mechanism. So you can really skin this any way you want. But you'd give it a broker, you give it a resource of what it's going to launch, whether it's an app or a desktop, the gateway to it, what display you're going to run it in, what accounts. These are AD accounts, right? And then which launcher machines they're going to run from. You give it a schedule, right? How often it's going to run. You can run concurrent sessions. You can schedule at a certain time of day or week. And then you give it a list of things to do, right? It's not running the CRM right now, but it's going to run this imaging app. It's going to run Excel, Word, PowerPoint, Chrome. Wait 5 seconds, run it all again. And then you can select your metrics and thresholds down here on what you want to, your SLAs, if you will, and what you want to report on.
So Mark, good question coming from the audience. But before we dive into that question, so can you talk a little bit about kind of the setup? So, you guys, I know are just a simple appliance, but also I think lately I know you can do AWS and I think you can do Azure now, right? So you guys have the ability to run in Azure, and also your setup, from a server perspective is fairly easy. Is that a fair statement? And then maybe I'm biased because I'm a techie, but I've set your stuff up and it's not too mind-boggling to get the initial stuff set up.
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. You can run it in public cloud. We have like an Azure native instance. You can run it on AWS. It's agnostic with any hypervisor. So this is just like a pre-built virtual appliance. It's like built on Debian Linux. It runs some Docker Swarm. So it's basically you download it, you import it into your hypervisor, you give it an IP address and a host name, and then you're off and running. You can access it through a browser. You have the architecture is pretty simple. So you have the virtual appliance, and then you'll have some AD accounts that'll actually conduct the synthetic tests. And then you have the concept of launchers. This could be, an Agile thin client. It could be a Windows physical machine, virtual machine. We have a Linux tarball. We have customers running on certain Linux thin clients as well. But you have a collection of these launchers that are actually going to fire sessions off into Citrix, Horizon, whatever it is. And then you just set up a connection. Those machines need to talk back to the appliance over 443, right? Everything's over 443 SSL. And that's pretty much it. These users have a logon script that they run when they log in that actually kicks off, what you see up here, the Login Enterprise engine with the screen banner, and talks to the appliance, pulls down the schedule of what we told it to do in the scenario, and then it runs. So yeah, that's pretty much it.
Now the launcher, so the ability to do that automated task, and one of the things I like to clarify is you guys talk a lot about Office, etc. But I just want to make it very clear to the audience that tool can be customized for any application, and it's pretty cool flow, and that's something that XenTegra can help you build out as well. A couple of our guys are trained on how to build the workflows and create the different scenarios for you. So it's not just locked to what Mark talked about today. If you have a custom app, you can build launcher workflows to be able to execute. You guys can plug into EMRs, you can plug into app X, app Y. So it's pretty cool and pretty flexible.
We have a list of growing workloads that are either community driven, we've built for customers, partners have built them, and we scrub them and obfuscate them so that you can pull down these templates. And plug in a few values that are like proprietary to your environment, and you can run them relatively simple. So
yeah, and this is new as of our last time, because I know you guys are building this, so I'm excited to see that this is done. So basically what we have here, got folks on the audience, is a community driven workflows, so that way you don't necessarily have to build them from scratch, and this will continue to grow as adopt Login VSI, and it's almost like the old days of app packaging is how I equate it. So it's very flexible. All right, so fun question from the audience. And can you kind of highlight, so why Login VSI versus typical monitoring tools? So like I won't say the vendors. You can probably, let's just keep it simple here. Your competitors. So who would you, if you were going to differentiate yourself from traditional monitoring versus logging VSI, what's the kind of your elevator pitch there, and how do you differentiate yourself from your traditional monitoring solution? And in some cases, you could be complementary, right?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't tell you to throw out your monitoring solution. I mean, I think you need monitoring tools for sure. There's a lot of guys that compete in that space. There's Control Up, there's Lakeside, there's EG Innovations, there's, SolarWinds, there's System Center. Everybody's got one, right? And they all pretty much do very similar things. They monitor system level resources, they pull services, they look at like the stack, right? The hardware, they look at the user processes and things like that. Um, we took a different route, right? Those tools are coming from the bottom up, right? And looking at all the system level resources. They're telling you what's green, yellow, and red, right? We're looking at the end user experience, what the end user sees, what they feel when they're using the apps. So, the system may show green, but then something may be fundamentally broken in the experience, or an app function may be broken. And a monitoring tool may tell you that happened. It may not, but the user is always going to tell you that happened. So I really tell people that we're like the marriage between a stack tool and an end user experience tool, right? Because if you have the end user experience, you can then correlate that to the infrastructure, and you can make your best informed decision about what happened and how do we not let it happen again. So that would be my answer to that, kind of a long answer.
Yeah, and I'll comment too. So, one of the things I see with you guys is you guys are more focused on, what's happening inside the session, whereas a lot of these other tools are focused on the peripherals of the session. So perfmon, stats, et cetera. Now, some of the tools are getting a little more mature, but they're still not getting into the actual load test scenario and change control scenario. So like, I won't say the vendor, but they do have a solution now that can do some basic login testing, but it's
Yep.
still not going to go and execute outside some of the applications that you guys do. And I think if we keep this wholly focused on just change control, how does an app impact a workload, or how does an app upgrade impact a workload, or how does a workload in Azure compare to a workload in on-premise? That's where, to me, Login VSI is a little step ahead as far as that in performance enhancement slash, end user compute, experience monitoring, but in session. So that's kind of how I summarize it. But so another
Yeah.
question is,
Yeah,
I'm
go
sorry,
ahead.
go ahead.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Mark. Nope, go ahead.
I was just gonna say that there's other tool sets out there that have a log on simulator, but it's essentially just like a log on, log off. And then there's other like app performance monitoring tools out there, but they're like, I'll mention App Dynamics as an example, but they specifically do, web scale automation synthetics. So they're geared specifically towards web apps, whereas we took the approach from the beginning to be focused on end user compute.
Yeah, nice. So there was a question around curious about, can Login VSI run on existing production servers alongside of regular users, or should you have a tester machine? So, I'm summarizing a little bit, Mohammed, but this is a common question that does come up with Login VSI. So basically, I'll generalize it. When you're running these tasks, these execution or launchers, as you call them, is it recommended to run it separate on a separate dedicated, or can you run them side by side as well? I mean, what's typical scenarios in the enterprise?
Side by side, like on a user's machine that they're actually using.
Yeah, he's asking, can you run the launcher piece on a machine that's actually being used, or is it best practice to run it on its own isolated virtual machine or machine?
Yeah, I would. I mean, you could run it on a user's machine, but they wouldn't like it. It would confuse them, because they're gonna actually have this user, like robotic user, doing things in the background, and it's just gonna confuse them. But yeah, so running it separately is probably the ideal way. Um, we can run on a variety of thin clients. We have a partnership with Igel, and Igel has these little $50 UD pocket devices that repurpose endpoints. And we find a lot of customers use those because it's really simple to set up. But like, for example, we have a large airline customer, and the larger airports are fine, but the smaller regional ones, they shut down at night. So they actually run these at the kiosks at the gate, those like IGIL clients, so that they can perform the synthetics right before, you know, the airport opens, so they can know they're ready to go. So yeah, I would definitely run it, you know, separately, but there's some low cost ways of doing that too. Or you could run it on BMs as well. It's up to you.
Yeah, so I'll dig in here too. So yeah, typically, Mohammed, it's not recommended to run Login VSI on an active server. Typically, what you'll do is you'll do load testing and app compatibility testing either at night when the servers are not being used, or you'll run a separate instance that has a mirrored image, et cetera, to test the load. And you would have what's called your synthetic users, and your synthetic users are users that mimic your environment, right? And so, yeah, there's a little, correct me here, keep me honest here, Mark, but a little agent that runs, that interacts with the server, the central management server, and that's what talks to, hey, what am I launching? And you guys use, it's not JSON, what do you guys use to communicate and give the task to the client?
It's actual executable, or there's a we have a couple ways. There's a PowerShell script that can run as well. It's basically a logon script that then kicks off the engine on the target. But the agent on the launcher is an actual like MSI that gets installed, and so you would treat the launcher just like a regular client machine. So if you're using Citrix, you'd load workspace on it. Using Horizon, you'd run, you know, the view agent on there. So
yeah, so Mohammed, so basically the key here is simple. It's you're running a launcher machine, and it's supposed to mirror your exact scenario of what you have in production. All right. And yes, you can run, like, for example, if you wanted to test loads at night, you could do that. And a lot of customers do that. They'll test the load, they'll do load testing at night with synthetic users to make sure that a change you made didn't impact your XenApp server or didn't impact your BDI session, right? So that's what a lot of the customers I typically come across do. All right, so we're going to wrap up on just a quick note. So thanks to Mark for presenting. If there are any final questions, please do ask. You know, I want to be respectful of everybody's time. We end at the top of the hour. But if you have any questions, and for some reason if we can't answer, we'll get to you post session or follow up. So definitely put it in the Q&A dialogue. So really quickly, XenTegra, yes, we can sell you Login VSI as well as a handful of other great vendors that we partner with. But let's face it, the reason why you work with a partner is because we build a solution that makes sense. So yes, we've been fully trained on Login VSI. We can come in and help you POC it alongside a Mark and team. And we can also come in and help you build some of these more customized flows as well. And sadly, you know, sad or whatever, I find it fun to do them because they're pretty cool. And if you're into packaging, like, you know, old days of packaging or MST building, it's very similar. And then if you're into coding, it's even more fun because it's a little more C-sharpy, if you will. Now, you know, one of the things we do is we do what's called free assessments. We are working with ways with Login VSI to see if we can bundle them into our assessments. So, but that said, we do offer a bunch of free assessments around, you know, end user compute environment, whether it's VMware or Citrix, your networking environment, as well as your NetScaler investment as well. So keep an eye out for that. We do a follow-up email, and I definitely recommend scheduling one of these because, you know, why not? It's free. You get a great anecdote of snippets of information, and you also get to feel how XenTegra works. And I call it the XenTegra interview. It's a great way to understand what we do and why we do it. Parallel to that, are you hiring? And if the answer is yes, definitely reach out. We have our staffing division. We're actually currently in the process of placing 5 different placements just this week. And we're working with various companies that we work with because not only do we know your environment, we know the caliber of person you want to hire, and our networks are pretty solid. So if you are looking to hire folks, and I don't care what part of IT it's in, definitely reach out. We got a great staffing arm of the business, and we're always looking to make sure you guys get reliable help. That said, we will be reaching out. You'll get a copy of this webinar today, so yes, there will be a recording. we'll be reaching out if you want to dig deeper and try to get this spun up in your own environment. That will be one of the topics of conversation. Or if you just want to dig deeper, let us know. We can get on the phone with Mark or another SE on the Login VSI staff and get more demos or get deeper with the solution. So I definitely recommend it. It's worth it. It's a great solution, especially if you're doing a lot of internal application and you're doing builds on a weekly, bi-weekly, if you're doing upgrades all the time. You want to know what that's going to do to impact performance. So with that, I'm going to look final Q&A, and if let's see, no more questions. But thank you for joining us. Definitely plan on joining us next week. We have great topics over the next few weeks. We got Microsoft, understanding EA agreements, understanding fast track, and we got a couple other great vendors coming up throughout the month of August. Cisco, we're going to focus on the Meraki line there. So we got a lot of great vendors coming up in Webinar Wednesdays. And that said, you can also get some Grubhub credits, so free lunch doesn't help as well. All right, with that, I'm going to say thank you for joining us. Here's our great board if you want to reach out some more and dig deeper. And I thank Mark for joining us today. So thank you, Mark, for taking the reins. And Brian, hopefully, if you're listening, all's well on your side. And that said, I'm going to say thank you for joining us. Have a great week. And I hope to see everybody next week, 11 o'clock sharp, for the next edition of Webinar Wednesdays.
Thank you for having me, Pete.
You're welcome, Mark. Have a great day.
You too. Thank you, everybody. Bye.